Hello everyone, this is Bentley from Kent, Washington. Today's video is going to be a little weird, so just a kind of an update before I dive in here, because this is an important lesson I think you all should learn from my mistake, because I made a giant one. I am working on the Plants for a Profit CO2, so that'll be coming out here soon. I'm going to do most of the extra footage and stuff this weekend. I was planning to actually release it the same day that this video is coming out, so that I would be that video instead of this one, but with what I'm about to get into, I felt this was a really relevant topic, so let's dive in. Monday night, I had probably my worst fish experience, period. So I've had kind of a bad 2 weeks, and I haven't talked about it because we've had the fish room tours and I've had some other stuff coming out that was scheduled, but it started about 2 weeks ago. The power company locally was replacing the meter attached to my house. So they were taking the power down to my house for about 10 minutes or so. This all happened while I was at work. I had had a notification it was going to happen sometime in like a month and a half long window. They gave me this huge window, so I had no clue when it was going to happen. And I thought maybe I would get another notification like, you're scheduled for blah, like a week ahead of time, or like maybe the day before. No, they just showed up and did the work. And I got a text notification on my phone, because they're attached to my phone for letting us know, like, if power outages are happening and they're working on service specifically in our area or something like that. I get text messages for the fish. I basically have signed up for those just for the fish. So I get this text message while I'm at work and telling me power is going to be out at your house. It should only take like 10 minutes. So of course, I'm a little paranoid that not everything is going to turn back on. Come home that day. Thankfully, everything turned on. The problem is one of my heaters stuck on. And for any of you who have ever had a heater stuck on, you know what that means. It means whatever was in that tank got way too hot and is probably gone. And sure enough, I lost everything in that tank. That tank being the one with the green dragon plecos and the Melanitania Cali rums that I got from Lucas Bratz. So, equipment failure, hurt really bad. I've since replaced that and unplugged it, and I'm working on getting that tank recycled after completely draining it and refilling it. It hurt. It hurt a lot. It's never fun losing every fish in a tank, especially something that's really cool like plecos or the Cali rum. It's an unnamed species. It's very rare. There's not a lot of people in the United States who have them. I got some from Lucas on a trade, and they were doing really good. They were starting to color up, and now they're gone. But that's not the lesson. That's the sad part, is this is not the lesson. So Monday this week, that's the 10th, if I can remember dates properly. I woke up in the morning. I did my usual routine of feeding everything before I ran out to work, and I had noticed one of my zebra plecos, the adult female, was just out. And I've seen her out of the cave every once in a while, and usually when she sees me, she darts off. And I didn't really think anything of it, because I don't feed them in the morning. I didn't really go close to that tank, so there's no reason for her to dart away and go hide in caves. So I didn't really think anything of it. I thought maybe she just worked. She was off in a corner, kind of hiding behind some slate and stuff out in the open. I didn't really think much of it. But that's kind of a warning sign. Most happy plecos are just always in hiding. They're almost never out, and they're paying a lot of attention, so if they see you, they immediately just dash away. I come home that night after work. It's Monday Night Football. The Seahawks are playing. As you can tell by my hat, I'm a Seahawks fan. So I got home, and it was already halftime, because I work a lot, and between that work and traffic, I don't get home until pretty late. So I sat down to watch the rest of the game. I'd been listening on the radio. Game finishes, and it's like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go feed. They give the plecos their nightly feeding, and then, empty the dehumidifier, make sure that the manual light I have to turn off on there, in that room rather, not on there, is off, and then I'll work about going to bed, get ready for work the next day. I went in and I saw one of my younger males, who's a at the edge of juvenile into like early adults. You know, he's about like 2 inches or so, 2.5 inches in size, which, you know, 3 to 3.5 for a full size zebra, is out. And that same female hasn't moved from her spot. And I wouldn't think that she would go back to that exact spot. And I'm kind of suspicious. And I lean in closer and realize that the female has clouded over eyes. And I immediately start panicking. And I can remember I was very panicked. My breathing was not controlled, all that kind of stuff. So I immediately run into my kitchen, wash my hands to make sure they're clean, go back in, and start pulling the pieces of slate and the caves out, looking for all the other fish to make sure it's not just one. Well, it's more than just one. I lost my entire colony of zebra plecos. 9 zebra plecos. So how? This is I had 2 of them alive at that time, and I moved them immediately out of that tank. My Leopoldi tank has really similar parameters, where it's warm, it just has a ton of plants, and it has a similar pH. So I moved them for fear of, you know, any one of your types of imbalances, nitrite, nitrate, ammonia. I wanted to get them in a clean water and hope that I'd done it fast enough. By the next morning, by Tuesday morning, I'd lost both of the 2 that were remaining, so I couldn't save them. So I started going through my head, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Now, I was burning down that tank right there. I immediately, after moving the fish, started water changing. The fish were really non-responsive. They were alive, but they would only wiggle a little bit. They weren't trying to run away from the net, and that's a real bad sign. That tells you it's something pretty substantial. So there's a combo of things that have happened, and this is where the lesson comes in. And it's my fault. It is 100% my fault. So number one, as you guys have heard me say a lot, I have a really busy schedule. I work quite a bit. I spend a lot of time in traffic because, unfortunately, the Seattle area traffic is just miserable. I lose anywhere between 2.5 to 3 hours of my day on average. Sometimes it's more, just to being in traffic. And I don't live without traffic. I live 20 minutes away from work. So that tells you how bad the traffic is here. Plus the hours I work, I'm very typically working something like 50 hours a week, sometimes 60. When you add in all the traffic, it's a lot of time out of the house. So most of my maintenance is done on weekends. And that leads to some problems where I don't pay as much attention to some of my tanks as I'd like to. Just full honesty, which is why most of my tanks are pretty heavily planted. It gives me a little wiggle room. Why I like bare water systems, why I overfilter my tanks. It gives me that buffer. Because I can't spend something like an hour a day staring at all my tanks to make sure they're okay. I get a few minutes in the morning when I'm doing my rounds feeding. I look at all my fish. It's not just like walk past, throw food, not pay attention. I'm very much paying attention to all the fish that are in every tank. I'm looking for anyone that's ill. But it's just I can't do a really thorough look like I would like to. That's what it comes down to. And then in the evening, I do another similar round where I'm checking all the tanks throughout my house, just making sure everybody's okay. If there's any, how some tanks, because they don't have lids or they have only a half lid, I'm checking water levels to make sure I don't need to do like a short top off before water changes on the weekend, something like that. All this little maintenance stuff, making sure filters are fine, light kind of touches the glass to make sure that I haven't like randomly lost heat or flow or something like that. Your usual things you can do very quickly in a few minutes, just zipping around your house in 10 minutes or so, you can get an idea of that everything's okay. So because I don't have that much time, my zebra looks are typically pretty quick. It's look at the substrate on the bottom of the tank. Do I see a ton of leftover food, more than I should? Or do I see like something I shouldn't see? No? Okay, walk on. Is the filter going? Do I have good flow? The water level's not too low because I've got a tidal 110 on that tank, which is a crazy amount of flow, but also, in the front it has that skimmer piece, and if it gets too low, it starts making this really loud sucking noise, and it can. I feel like that noise is probably stressful to a fish like a zebra pleco, so I try to prevent that from happening. Now, I'd taken some advice from a zebra breeder through a friend, that the way that they got their fish to spawn, and because so many of mine are adults, this is the advice I was following, hoping I could get a spawn out of my zebra plecos, was to kind of simulate the dry season by not water changing every week, and let the water level kind of come down, let it get a little grungy, not so grungy that you're having water quality issues, which obviously by this I let that happen. But I'd been paying attention, making sure the water was clear, making sure that I had good filtration, very actively paying attention to the health of that filter to make sure it wasn't getting plugged up, that it wasn't losing any flow. That way I don't have to worry about ammonia or anything like that. Those filters have such a huge bed for media, and I've jammed that thing full of, it's got several layers of sponge, and then also a lot of ceramic media in it as far as like how deep that thing is. And one time I might have to pull apart how I do those Tidal 110s. For those of you who might have them, just how I set them up to really optimize that back filter cartridge. I never saw any kind of issues like that, and they had been going so well for so long, I really wasn't stressing about it, and that's, it's kind of a little minor neglect, right? Where you get complacent. Complacent is the real word. So I'd been talking with, a few of my friends who are pleco people, including Dean, and this is no fault of Dean's. We had been identifying one of the adults because I was pretty confident I had a female, and I was getting second opinions from some other people, and it looked really positive. It looked really good. We had a strong chance to have a female, which meant I have a strong chance to actually get them to spawn. So some advice I got from Dean was like, well, the only way you can figure it out is keep water changing, doing what you're doing, and fatten her up a little bit, and eventually you'll get a spawn. Okay. We're going to fatten her up a little bit. So just feed a little extra. And if I see too much stuff at the bottom of the tank the next morning after I've fed in the evening, don't feed that next day. Wait till they clean it all up. But also I'm trying to let some stuff happen. So I got some leaf litter in there, and I'm letting that kind of break down and do its thing. And you guys can probably start seeing where this is going. Right? Had a heavy feeding over the weekend. I took a day off, which was Sunday. Or Saturday I didn't feed. Sunday I looked. It looked like they cleaned almost all of it up. It looked like it was only leaf litter. The problem is what I couldn't see easily, which was some stuff back in the caves and stuff like that hadn't been eaten and was getting kind of nasty and slimy and breaking down. And I got what I am pretty confident is a major nitrate spike. And I was 2 days before my next water change. I water changed them on Wednesdays. They're the only tank that I don't do on the weekends. I do it on a weird schedule because it forces me to do them at a strange time, but also lets me do their water changes with colder water, because the other part of the advice was you keep that tank really warm, water change with water that's like 6 degrees colder than you keep it to simulate rainfall in the flood season. And this is when they normally spawn in the wild. So, I'd been doing that when I did my water changes. I was doing water changes every 2 weeks. At that point, I let it go for 3 weeks, like once, and I felt kind of the heebie-jeebies about it, and I stopped doing that. And I would do little top-offs at the same temperature water to try and not make it seem like flood season, just to prevent the filter from getting low or from the water level getting low and making lots of noise. But eventually I got a nitrate spike, and I didn't identify it fast enough. And because I didn't identify it fast enough, I lost them. So what's the lesson here, other than don't be a dummy? Don't overfeed your fish and underwater change. I I had some floating plants in there that were big nitrate hogs. But because I don't like that tank, I let ambient light from the rest of the room, because there's so much light in that room, light that tank to help keep them a little more comfortable. Those plants weren't getting as much like direct light as they wanted, because they're thin and level, and they're getting like kind of the side light as opposed to top down light. So I had to remove them probably 3 weeks ago, and I have been literally to the level of busy to where I haven't had time to go to my local hardware store or nursery and get some pothos to be my nitrate sponge. And I got really busy the last few weeks. We've had some health issues inside the family that I've been paying attention to, and thus like little things like, oh, I can just, it'll be fine for a couple extra weeks. They've got that giant filter. It'll be fine. When it's like, yeah, my filter helps me with nitrite and ammonia, but it doesn't help me with nitrate. Right? And it's these little things that I should know better, but I'm so used to that crutch of heavily planted tanks that I got complacent and it slipped my mind. And I have paid an incredibly heavy cost. And I'm not talking financially. I cannot tell you how just horrible I felt and still feel. I mean, I'm recording this Friday evening because this is the first day I've really had the I guess you'd say willpower to do so. Some of us never like admitting when we're wrong, and I'm not that person. I'm the first person to admit when I screw up, because I want to learn from it. And if I don't admit it, I'm not going to learn from it. But I think it was more the devastation. My girlfriend, she is such a trooper. The second I started panicking because she heard me, she immediately came in and was like, what's going on? And I told her that some of the zebras were dead, and I'm still still pulling the top layer of slate out to get to the bottom caves. And she was immediately like, what can I do? What can I do? And I was like, I need to work. I need to work. And I was telling myself I need to breathe because I was having trouble breathing. I was so panicky. And that's not me normally. I'm usually pretty cool under pressure, but 9 zebra plecos, you guys can do the math on how much those guys cost, especially adults. And you got to keep in mind that of the 9, 6 of mine are adults and 2 were female. 4 were male. I got to confirm that afterward when I was going through the bodies, unfortunately. So I was 100% right. I did have an adult female. I had 2 adult females. And one of my young adults, just getting out of juvenile, it's like 2.5 inches, is starting to where they should have like odontodes growing in if they're males, or not growing in very much. And it was looking like I might have had a 3rd female. And it's soul crushing. It is soul crushing. So why am I making this? No matter what advice you get from even somebody who's a successful breeder, even if it's me, if it's some of the best fish people out there, and I don't doubt the advice I got from this person, but I know that they just have a little more time than I do, and they have such they're set up specifically for it, and they know what they're doing, and they're not complacent. And I slipped, so I paid a price. So if you water change once a week, if somebody tells you water change once every 3 weeks, ignore it. That's the lesson. The real lesson here is, no matter how good the advice stick to what you're good at. If you're upkeeping better water quality because you water change that often, don't stop. Just don't stop. It's if you think like, I need to fatten these fish up, I should feed a little more, unless you're really set up to do it, like you're water changing multiple times a week or something like that, don't. Just wait. Just be patient. I was not patient. And to think I've had adults and I've been waiting, and I've had these zebras for months, and I finally got so excited because I knew I had a female. I knew I had a chance to breed these fish, and they're so hard to get a hold of nowadays that the opportunity to breed them blurred my sight and made me do some very stupid things. And made is not correct. I chose to do some stupid things. And my only advice to you guys is do not repeat my mistake. Learn from my mistake so that you don't have that kind of devastating pain, because it is losing an entire tank of fish, especially something that not necessarily because it's expensive, but because you're really excited at the opportunity to do something with them. Because my plans were simple. I was keeping my first batch of fry, probably my first 2 or 3, and I'm not going to sell any of them. I've seen some really interesting statistics is not correct, but some trends where captive bred zebras tend to have a very high rate of being male and a very low rate of being female. And now that they're not allowed to be exported anymore, so you can't get wild caughts, it's really hard to get females. So my goal was to keep a batch or 2 a year, separate them, and watch them grow up and monitor the rate at which I'm getting males and females out of those batches so that I could put together a more thorough report with some real numbers. And I mean, this isn't like true scientific statistics. It's too small a number of fish to do that. But if I could watch year over year, clutch over clutch, and see, am I seeing differences in the male-female rate? Keep in touch with the people who buy fish from me when I do sell clutches, and pay attention to how often they're getting males and females, and mark it, track it all. I'm a computer guy. I'm a data guy. Tracking things is something that I'm used to. Reporting that data, keeping spreadsheets, easy. That was... It's sad to say that nerdy nonsense was the most exciting part about owning zebras for me, is being able to track that and see if I could put the trends I've seen and things I've heard from some people that I trust into a truth, to just show the numbers and be like, hey, here's what's really going on, at least with my fish, and here's how I'm keeping them. And then try to work with some of the other breeders who are out there and try to get that same data from them if they can. And it's hard with some guys who like sell a lot of fish and aren't worried so much about keeping them, but it's doable. That was what I was really excited for, and I screwed up. You screwed up bad. And I've learned a terribly painful lesson for it, and my hope is that you guys can learn that same lesson from me and never repeat it. You know, just patience is always your best friend in this hobby, and usually I'm very good at that. But the excitement of starting something, especially with a fish that is that hard to get a hold of, and yeah, they're expensive. Yes, the opportunity to sell clutches of fish is like, you know, a new massive setup quickly is an entire batch of fish. Now, granted, it takes you 6 months or so to raise them to size, but you know, you guys know, if you can hear how excited I get with baby fish. The thought of baby zebra plecos like had me literally giddy at night when I knew I had a female. And I would put food in the tank, you know, I'd put some frozen bloodworms in, or I'd put some live brine in, and like I would be just like, oh, soon it's gonna happen, soon it's gonna happen. I would get really, really excited. I'd be heading up to bed that night, or heading up to do, you know, whatever I need to do, and just that thought that I'm gonna see baby zebra plecos soon always had me really excited. Almost as excited as, like, you know, that first time I get really successful with a new rainbow. And as you guys know, I love rainbows. They're my favorite fish, period. And it just was soul crushing. So that's my lesson for you guys. And I just want to be clear, this is not some this is not some like request to, you know, oh, pity me, help me out. No, not at all. This is, I feel like these kind of mistakes can only be learned. Like, I think any YouTuber or whatever who goes, oh, I had this unfortunate thing happen, please help me. When it comes to fish, like medical health, I totally understand. But when it comes to fish, it's like, oh, I had this horrible thing happen, please help me so I can have that fish again. You don't learn a lesson. You don't really learn that lesson that way. That's how I view it. that's how my brain clicks. Is that the only way to learn this lesson is to know that, like, I can't replace them. Not for a long time. Because it's very expensive to buy zebra plecos, and I don't know if I can keep them for a while, because I'm just shattered on what I did. And it will take, I can't get adults again, and it'll take years to raise them up. And just with the pleco losses I've had in the last 2 weeks, I almost feel like I'm cursed on plecos. So I'm just gonna soldier on with rainbow fish. Is really what it comes down to. I guess the good news is I have a couple of open tanks to raise fry in. And it's like the horrible way to think of it, but it's the only positive light. It's the only positive thing other than learning a massive lesson that will probably forever influence me keeping fish, and that I won't ever let it happen again. So I'm sorry for this, like, really somber video. I know it is not my usual self, where I'm usually a lot more chipper, but and I try to fake out a little laugh, or push it out. I'm a person who likes to look at everything positively as much as I can. That's just the way I like to live my life. But you can't. Sometimes something bad happens, and when it's your fault, it hurts real bad. It hurts really bad. So that's it, guys. I felt the need to tell you guys, because I know the zebra plecos are really popular on my channel, and unfortunately, they won't be on my channel anymore. Maybe sometime in the future, I'll try again with zebras, but I think I'm going to wait to see if Dean has any luck, although he seems to think that almost all of his are males, if not all males. And if that's the case, it's going to be really hard to find good zebra plecos locally, and it means finding a breeder I trust, and that's a lot of work. But that's it, guys. Please learn from my lesson. Just please learn. Complacency is the easiest killer of fish, the easiest reason to start getting algae blooms, bacteria problems, any of that stuff. This is the one hobby where you slack a little and you'll hurt a lot. So always be diligent, never rush anything, always be patient, and it'll pay off in the end. That's the lesson. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.